Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts, hold on tight. You're in for one crazy, epically cool, and amazing ride tonight on the Josh Nolan and Oliver Schultz Full Throttle Racing Show. Hashtag one on YouTube. Tonight we have with us racing sensation Chad Cutsworth. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So, Chad, let's talk about your racing career. Where did it all start for you?
It started about 21 years ago in West Union when the Echo Valley track was still open. I raced a bomber or pure start car there for a few years. I got the opportunity. A buddy of mine let me drive one of his last race of the season. So then in that off season, I built my own, raced it. It was a 74 Chevelle Malibu. And then I built the Monte Carlo after that. Big cars. That's when we were still racing the big cars, the big old boats.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then kind of got out of it, took a hiatus from the racing side of things, and kind of got into some other motorsports stuff off and on. Ever since I graduated from high school, I pretty much have been into some sort of motorsports, whether it be racing, drag racing, pulling, go-karts. I've dabbled a little bit of everything over the last 30 years.
So, Chad, go
Shoot.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. So what are you racing now, Chad?
Right now, this past year, I built a 72 Nova. I was racing a nostalgia Nova car.
Okay.
Um, I just happened to just sold that, and kind of iffy what I'm going to race next year. But outside of the racing, I do pull garden tractors. Been pulling them again for about 7 years, and I just bought a four-cylinder mini rod. It's got a little 2.34 motor in it. It's turbocharged. And so I pull that, or I'll be pulling that next year along with my stock garden tractor. And then as far as the nostalgia racing, it's kind of up in there what I'm going to do next year.
Well, we'll see what happens because I'd love to see you on a nostalgia car out there next year. That would be kind of cool. So, if I was to go to a nostalgia race, I'd hope I run into you.
Well, maybe we'll run into each other if you do go to nostalgia race because I'm just a real big fan of them. I think it's really growing. There's a few series that are pretty close here to Northeast Iowa and Central Iowa, that and I know down south in southern Iowa, they're a really big thing. It just seems to be a growing class, and it keeps some of these dirt tracks going around here.
Yeah, definitely. So, Chad, what do you like about pulling tractors, garden tractors?
The garden tractors, I've always been a small engine guy since I was in high school. It's for me, it's a couple different things. I just think it's neat taking a stock old Cub Cadet garden tractor and getting those little single cylinders just punched out and putting out a whole bunch of horsepower to where they can pull a 6,000 pound sled down the track. And that's just with the stock, in a stock class. And then you can just go from there. You can run them on alcohol. You can beef them up. I've heard of twin stock motors putting out well over 100 horsepower out of a little lawnmower engine. So it's just the head scratching and the engineering involved. I that's really always attracted me, and that's really always been me in motorsports. I haven't always been the best driver or operator in the world, but putting these together and learning the technology, that's the big draw for me. And it's the same way with racing the dirt cars. It was always learning. Um, that's what's always drawn me to motorsports. I never really fit in with band or sports in school. It was always internal combustion engines. Yeah, that was my thing. So that's always been my draw to it to this day, 31 years after I've been out of high school.
So, Chad, when you're racing your nostalgia tour races, what's your race car number?
93. Well, it used to be 93. But when I put this nostalgia car back together this year, it was 15. Um, Number 15, I got a picture of it right here. Let's see. I don't know how well that's going to come
Oh,
up, but
very cool. Yeah, oh yeah, come out really good, really good, really
that's the
good.
car that I raced this last year, and it was number 15, and no sentimental reason to that number other than that's my employee number with my employer. I my employee number is 15, so that's what I slapped on the car.
Okay. So Chad, when you're out to racing this nostalgia tour, what's it like to race in that nostalgia tour, those races?
It's just really cool seeing the different vehicles on the track. Most of the nostalgia rules, it's like a 1979 or 78 body or older. No G bodies, no metric frame bodies anyway. You can run a metric frame, just the bodies have to be the older body style. And they I see Mustangs out there, my Nova, older coupes racing, and we're all on the track together, so Camaros, and it's just seeing these people like myself getting out on the track after not being in a car for 20 years, and going out there and seeing these shoebox Chevys out there, and like I said, old Dodges and stuff. It's just really cool. It takes me back to my first dirt track race when I was 10 years old, getting back to those older body styles.
So Chad, you said you guys get a lot of nostalgia tour cars. On an average, what do you guys get for car count for the nostalgia tour race?
Um, you know, it depends on the series you're with, but one series, there was 30 cars there that night, and the other series, I think there's 14 of us or 15 of us,
Okay.
which in my opinion is pretty good because over the years we all know that some of the car counts at some of our local dirt tracks have come
Yeah.
down,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and so to see this many dirt cars or nostalgia cars get together and go out there, is pretty cool.
Yeah. So Chad, with the nostalgia tour and stuff like that, so which tracks are you guys primarily running on nowadays?
Um, this year was kind of Fort Dodge, Mason City, um, and I think for the nostalgia cars out of the club out of Mason City, I think it looks like Fort Dodge is going to be a primary track next season for the dirt cars. But then you start looking at the Air Series, which I never run with the Air Series, but they run kind of south central, southeast Iowa quite a bit. They get up to the Independence area and
Okay.
Dubuque and like Donaldson. They're
Okay.
that southeastern part of the state and a little bit over to Illinois and Wisconsin, I believe also.
Okay. I know at one time the nostalgia tour stuff would come up to Fairmont Raceway, but I haven't seen them there for a few years.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They used to go up there. I never made it up to Fairmont with the Nostalgia Dirt Series. But yeah, I don't know exactly what happened or what's going on there. But I know they had raced up to Fairmont before, but never when I was involved with them.
Okay. So Chad, okay, with your nostalgia tour, what kind of things can you do to your car to adapt to the track, the car for the track? Because I know a little bit about IMCA stock cars and stuff like that. I don't know what you can do and stuff like that too for the nostalgia tour
Well,
races.
for the nostalgia cars, you're kind of put into a box a little bit, like with the Airs series. With the nostalgia cars, you gotta, you're limited. Like my Nova that I put together was on an old Racemart Raider, modified chassis, which was legal to run, but
Yeah.
um, it had to be a leaf spring car. It couldn't be like a 4-link car or anything like that.
Mm. Yeah.
So you're kind of looking at tire pressures, spring rates, kind of the same stuff, just in a different weight placement. With the Air Series, I think you got to weigh 3,200 pounds to race with them. With the Nostalgia Dirt Series, they didn't have a weight limit, but they were more restricted to, like, if I ran the stock class, you had to run a 2-barrel carburetor, um, 15-inch tire, 15-inch wheel. You're kind of could put into a box that way, and you had to have the stock front stub on it. But running a modified chassis was okay as long as it was a leaf spring car. So that's what I had, was a Race Smart Raider chassis from way back in the day. that had was a leaf spring rear end car on it. So as far as
Okay.
adjustments, you can adjust your shackle, where you're wearing the shackles and and ride height and different things in the back.
Yeah. So Chad, now okay, you don't know if you're going to build a car for next year. Well, I would love to see you, like I said, build another car and come out there next year. That'd be pretty cool to see you out there.
Well, it could very well happen. I'm not saying it won't. The reason I sold mine, I built it last winter as a winter project, and then I was made an offer I couldn't refuse on it. And like I said, getting back to the technology and learning, a lot of times I like building them more than I like racing them, but I love racing them. It's a hell of a rush. And, but I saw the opportunity to make a few bucks and so that's what I did. So, you never know. There could be another one in the shop this year to put together, get running, get it out on the track, make sure everything's good to go, and maybe the following winter there'll be another new one in. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
that's kind of how
yeah.
I operate. It keeps these machines running and alive. And it keeps me occupied in the wintertime because we live in
Oh
Iowa.
yeah.
I don't like going outside much in the wintertime if I don't have
Oh
to.
yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So Chad, how much success have you had as a race car driver in your racing career?
Um, I wouldn't say I had a ton of success. At best, I would say I was a mid pack, upper mid pack driver, and car builder or car mechanic. I never got into it super seriously to where um, that's all I did. It's always been more of a hobby and a pastime for me. I've won a few heat races back in the day, you know, um, but but I'm not a top tier driver. Or, I never have been, and I never expected to be. Now outside of the dirt cars, garden tractor pulling and stuff, yeah, I've had some good success with that. But as far as the dirt cars, I'm mediocre or average, I would say. My stuff finished the race. I've only had to have my car put on the trailer for me because it was too busted up. I was in the emergency room. But other than that, I've always had success being able to drive my stuff onto the trailer and live to fight another day.
So Chad, okay, going into your racing career now, looking into your racing career, what is your 5 year plan with your racing career?
My 5 year plan, racing,
Yeah.
still want to be involved with it one way, shape, or form or another. Um, whether that happens, I've had some back issues in the past. That's kind of kept me at bay at somewhat, but I'd be in my mid 50s. I want to be racing and doing something in motorsports, whether it be dirt track racing, tractor pulling, drag racing, whatever, till the day I die. I want to be
Oh yeah, yeah.
involved with motorsports. Um, the smell of methanol, the smell of racing fuel, the sounds of the candles lit under the hood. That's what drives me for a hobby and for my
Oh yeah.
when I don't have to be at work. So my 5 year plan is to be doing exactly what I'm doing right now is involved some way.
So okay, now going a little bit further, Chad, what is your 10 year plan with your racing career?
My 10 year plan, I would say my 10 year plan is to have my 14, 15-month-old grandson involved in motorsports and me helping him out with that.
Oh
I,
yeah,
you know,
definitely.
I got a daughter and a son, and my daughter had a baby, my grandson, about 14 months ago. My son was never much into the motorsports. He raced go-karts when they were younger. My daughter raced go-karts when they were younger, but they never had the draw to it like I did, but I never pushed it on them either. I let them make their own decision. If it wasn't something that was for them, we moved on. But I'm hoping my grandson and knowing his dad, he'll be into motors and loud noises and the rush. So In my 10-year plan, I want to be involved in motorsports, and I'm hoping my grandson will be involved with me.
And so that's awesome that you bring that up, Chad, because we got to keep the next generation going as far as and keep them coming into the sport because if not, it'll just fade away. Which I would hate for that to happen. But Chad, you know, so when you were out there racing, who helps work on your race car?
When I put my first race car together 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I did pretty much all the turning of the wrenches on it myself and learned by fire. But I did have help. Danny Roche from the area here was a huge influence on me. He gave me my first shot driving a car. When he was getting out, he had like 5 or 6 of them, and he wanted to see them all on the track at the same time for the last race of the season. So I got to climb in one of them. Out of 15 cars that night, my first time in the car, I finished sixth. So he was a huge influence and someone that I could lean on, and he set my cars up for me. They would go on the rack and he would set them up. But as far as putting it together, getting it on the track, that was all me. Now with the nostalgia car, it was very much the same thing. It was something for me to do last winter, and I bought the car with the body hung on the frame and a motor and transmission in it, but it was nowhere near race ready or safe enough to race. So I pretty much redid the whole car myself, um, and got it set up to race this past year. Um, so that was one thing. It's always been me, wrenching on the car. It's not always that easy anymore to get people to go along with you. And that can drive a lot of people away. And that's one reason I really never got too excited or too, that got to get this car together this week. Cause then you're, not sleeping at night, working on the car till 4 or 3 in the morning, which I started down that path 20 years ago. And I said I'd never do that again because that kind of spoiled it for me back then. So I've had people I could lean on and get advice from. But as far as turning wrenches, putting a car together, putting a garden tractor together, putting a drag car together, it's always been just me.
So Chad, who do you have for sponsors on your race car?
This year for the nostalgia car, really the only sponsor I had was Fence Oil and LP in Protivin, Iowa. That's who I work for, and I got some. They were able to help me out with a few different things, and they've always supported. They support, a few local race cars, USRA guys like Ben Modry drives a B mod. Jackson Shateshka raced a stock car this year. Fence Oil sponsored him. And so they've always sponsored a couple, three local dirt track drivers every year. And so I was able to get a few things, use shop time and stuff at their shop to help me out for the year. But the rest of the finances came from myself.
So are you still looking for sponsorship for your racing team there, Chad?
If I would to get back, if I put another car together, I'd always look for it. I really don't always go out and pursue looking for it. I have in the past, but since I wasn't gonna, commit to racing for a point series or racing on a weekly basis, I didn't really pursue much for sponsorship this year. Now, if I was to really go after the points or something with like the Nostalgia Dirt Series or the Air Series, to where there was going to be more exposure for whoever would sponsor me, I would absolutely, look for that sponsorship.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if Chad Cutsworth gets back into racing next year, definitely reach out to him because he'd appreciate the sponsorship on his race cars as he gets further into his racing career. So Chad, um, you know, turning to this point of the racing show now, okay, do you have some crazy stories you'd like to share with us about your racing career? Like, man, I was involved in this wreck, or man, I had, this is what it was like to win this race that you'd
You
like
know,
to share
I,
with us.
I got two things that will always stick out in my head. The first one was a heat race at Echo Valley Speedway. Um, there was like half a dozen, seven of us in the heat. Like I said, I was always a mid pack driver, but for that specific heat, for whatever, the car was dialed in and really good that night. And me and another gentleman from over by Waukon, we were first and second in our heat race, and we were fender to fender the whole race. And coming to the last lap, I was on the inside, he was on the outside, and I could have love tapped him and got him around him for that heat weight race win, but I didn't, and I stayed right with him. And I felt it when I hit my right rear fender or bumper hit the wall coming out of four on that last lap. And they said from the stands it was the neatest thing they ever seen because we were side by side and I was throwing sparks coming out of turn four with my up
Wow.
against the wall, and they just said seeing those old two cars because he was in a Monte Carlo and I was in my big old boat Chevelle, and just seeing us come sideways out of turn four and throwing sparks, they said that was one of the neatest things they ever seen there. That was the one
Very
thing that
cool.
always stick out in my head. The other one was the wreck I had with the at Echo Valley. I got turned going in between one and two. It was a wet, greasy track that night, and I was kind of laying back, but I got turned and I got T-boned in the driver's door, and that's the only time I've ever been knocked out. But I got T-boned. My head hit the roll bar, my helmet hit the roll bar, and it shut me off. And I remember the official
Wow.
shaking me and waking me up, and he woke me up, excuse me, and got me out of the car. They got me into the ambulance, went and got x-rayed. I had a separated shoulder. My right shoulder was separated out of the socket, and I had a mild concussion. So they released me from the hospital. I got a ride back to the track, and they had my car all loaded up. And it had a broken axle, tweaked the frame a little bit in the back, but it wasn't really bad. But I still have the helmet to this day. I had my Simpson Bandit racing helmet on, and there was about a 4-inch scuff on the side of it where my head hit the roll
Oh,
bar. And I kept that helmet, and I still have that helmet. I'll never forget it because I'd never been knocked out before, you know, till that point.
so Chad, okay, we're talking about your racing career and stuff. Who is the race car driver you looked up to growing up and to this point? Who's your go-to race car driver that man you say to yourself, man, I wish I could be just like this guy.
Growing up and getting started, um, I'll go back to Danny Roush to who I looked up to because that guy could take any motor, I mean, he was a wizard. He could put anything together and make it work. He never, and he'll openly admit he never had the biggest motor. He never had the most money in his car, but he knew how to drive. Echo Valley was a very big, long track. It was like a half-mile track, and he could put his car up on the top side and just keep his foot in it so he could keep up with the big motors because back then it's when the big 406s or the 427 small blocks were first starting to be a really big thing, and there was a lot of them out there, 383 strokers, there was a lot of them. And he'd go out there with junkyard motors with mismatched pistons in them, and he'd go out there and hang with them. And so to this day, I always think that, if I could have ever been like somebody, it would be him because he was a genius and he is a genius.
So, okay, Chad, when you're at the racetrack and you're getting ready to strap into your race car, or shall I say, lawn tractor, what helps get you psyched up and motivated to go out there and do that?
Music, you see, I never wore um like iPods or earphones or anything, but I would turn music up. I did it this summer racing the stock car. I put some music, some good hard rock or good old 80s hair band metal on the radio, and just kind of tune everything out for a little bit, and and just think I would just put my mindset in that I get to go do this stuff. I don't have to go do this stuff. I get to go do this stuff. And I just thank the big man up above, and thank my wife and thank everybody around me that understands that this is me. This is who I am. So I feel fortunate to be at a position in my life where I get to do this stuff if I want. And but like I said, music clears my head and cleanses my soul, and then I just go.
Speaking about music, what is your go-to band?
My go-to band, oh, that's a tough one because there's a lot of them, but I Motley Crue, Metallica, those are my always my two go-tos. Guns N' Roses. This is the stuff I grew up on. Been to a few concerts. I like Tesla. I saw Tesla in concert. Even some older, like Kiss. Seen Kiss a lot of times in concert. So any of those bands that have like a good driving, ass kicking beat to their song, that's the kind of stuff that pumps me up.
Okay, so Ted, when you're at the racetrack, you're getting hungry. What's your go-to food at the track?
Super nachos, baby, with everything you can on it. All the jalapenos, all the salsa, all the onions, whatever. My wife is in the next room, but she'll attest to this. When I go down to West Union to the races, or we go wherever to the races, that's my first stop is the food shack. And if super nachos are there, I'm on them. That's my guy right there. Super
Oh
nachos
yeah.
and a Diet Mountain Dew. I'm all about
Oh
it.
boy. Oh yeah. Yeah, now we're talking. Now we're talking. So Ted, when you're away from the racetrack, what's your go-to restaurant?
My go-to restaurant when they're not at the racetrack, anything Chinese. I'm a Chinese food guy. So
Oh yeah.
if we get out of town and go out on the bike or whatever, and we get to somewhere where Chinese restaurant we've never been to, we're there. I'm a Chinese food guy. So there's really not one specific restaurant, but my go-to fast food though is Arby's. If there's an Arby's around
Oh,
and we're in town, I'm at Arby's. I'm a big Arby's fan.
okay, okay, okay. So Ted, when you're at home, what's your favorite home cooked meal that you guys make at the house?
Home cooked meal at the house, my favorite one, probably Reuben's. I'm a Reuben guy
Oh yeah.
too.
Oh
We
yeah.
just had
Oh
them the
yeah.
other night. I'm
Oh
a
yeah.
Reuben guy. So
Oh
whenever we
yes.
make Reuben at home, that's probably my favorite home cooked meal.
So Ted, what's your favorite thing that you enjoy most about being a race car driver? Do you enjoy dealing with the fans? Do you enjoy working on the cars?
I would say fans and the kids getting back to the younger generation. Um, one quick story from when I was back racing in my Echo Valley days. It was a rough night one night, and I would always hang out in the pits, talk to people, BS, whatever. So I'm a smoker, so I was sitting on the back of my trailer, car was all loaded up. I was having a cigarette, and it must have been a 7 or 8 year old boy with his mom walking through, and he come up and had a T-shirt. He said, "You signed my T-shirt." I said, I didn't win the race, but I didn't even do that good. Well, I don't care. I want your autograph. And, so that interacting with kids like that, getting back to the younger generation, that's pretty powerful stuff to me, being able to it's hard to believe doing what we do there, but there is a kid that's looking up to you somewhere. So that's a very cool
Exactly.
part of it.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Like I said, the kids look up to us. We've got to be really good role models for them. Um,
Absolutely.
so Ted, um, okay. So what do you like to do for fun away from the racetrack now, Chad?
Outside of the racetrack or going to the races, um, I got a Harley. I like hopping on the Harley. Haven't been able to do it much the last couple of years. It's just been busy, and I mentioned my back issues earlier. But for fun, I like to get on the Harley. My wife and I have kind of a hobby farm here, so we've got a donkey and pet pigs and pet goats and pet chickens. So working outside and working on whether it be cleaning manure up or mending fences or just hanging out with the animals. That's kind of fun stuff that's outside of racing. Doing something excuse me, doing something different is kind of just putzing around here on the farm, the hobby farm we call it.
So, okay, you were talking about your Harley. What year is your Harley you got?
I've got, oh geez, what year is it? 2006 Harley Ultra Classic. One of the
Okay,
first for one of the first models of the fuel injected bikes.
okay.
Before we were married, my wife and I bought that. Here, I got a picture of that. See if I can get that up on there.
Oh, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Yep,
That is,
that's our
yeah, that is
bike.
pretty cool.
We got that here shortly before we were married. We've been married 7 years. Come this Sunday will be our 7 year anniversary. So that bike's not cost me anything but one battery. I paid for the bike, haven't had to put a dime into it other than a new battery, and doesn't get ridden a whole lot, but it's always there if we want to go.
Okay, so Chad, do you have any advice for the kids coming up in the racing world?
You know, yeah. There's a couple things I would tell young kids or kids that were like me, 18, 19 years old, getting out on their own. First of all, you don't have to jump into a modified for your first vehicle. You don't have to jump into a B mod for your first vehicle. I used to be a very anti four cylinder Hornet guy or four cylinder Flyers or four cylinder guy. But over the years, I realized, that that's kind of an economical way to get started. My advice is to start small, whether it be go karts or a four cylinder modify or a four cylinder Hornet, or you know, and make sure you're gonna like it. And it'll you can cut your teeth understanding what it takes to get a race car on the track. Um, Second piece of advice I'd give anybody getting into racing, whether they be kids, be middle aged, or whatever. If you're going to get involved with a series or a group, do your homework on them first, and make sure that I'm going to try to be as nice as I can without mentioning anything other than the fact that make sure what you're getting involved with, the people that are also involved with it or putting it on are pretty legit. Make sure that you're getting involved with a series or a group of individuals that are solid. That organization's going to be there for years to come. Um, it's happened to me in the past where you get involved with something, put a lot of money up to get involved with something, and then poof, it just all goes away, and then you're stuck.
Wow.
And that's really all I'm going to say about that. But just make sure you get involved with something that's really solid, and do your research and your homework first.
Okay, so Chad, okay, let's go a little bit further into your racing career now, a little bit, Chad. So, who are some of your friends at the racetrack?
Friends at a racetrack, you know, I got a buddy that I used to work with. His name is Todd Kelly. He used to race modifieds years ago. He still goes to the races from time to time. So he's a buddy. Kind of when we get to the races, I'm from Fort Atkinson here in Little Northeast Iowa, but there's a lot of local races around. So kind of sit in that group when I go to the races to watch, sit in my hometown group here, and kind of root for the hometown heroes. Um, but as far as friends at the racetrack, when I go to a dirt track event, everybody's my friend because we're all there for one common interest, and that's another thing about racing that's always drawn to me to it. Because if you're there because you're interested in it, and so I feel I share common interest with everybody that's around me at the track.
Okay, very cool, Chad. Very cool. So, Chad, let's see here. uh, So it's pretty awesome to have you on and talk about the nostalgia tour because I don't know that much about the nostalgia tour and stuff like that. I'd like to see a lot more promotional stuff out on the nostalgia tour, but they don't talk a lot about it, and it's quite crazy in that retrospect.
Yeah, the nostalgia dirt series or nostalgia racing in general is very cool. I mean, it's just the nostalgia dirt series there out of Mason City. They promote a big race that's coming up next weekend, and it's in Nichols, South Carolina, which is about 1,100 miles from here. Now, before I sold my car, I was really seriously thinking about going down to it because they call it the North versus South. It's all vintage cars. It's open to all vintage cars. I mean, whether it be a sprint car, a vintage late model, and they make it work to split the classes. And they call it the North versus South because there's cars from the South and then the cars from up north that make the journey down. Um, I work in the LP industry, so this time of year is not good for me to be gone. This is corn drying season, so it was tough for me logistically and work wise to make that work. So I thought about it for a brief time, but then kind of thought, no, that's probably not going to work. Ended up selling the car anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. But if anybody out there, if you ever get a chance to go to a nostalgia race, you know, do it. I went to one 3 years ago. They were up in Decorah at the Winneshiek Raceway. It was the Upper Iowa Speedway at that time. And then the folks from Mason City, the Nostalgia Dirt Series, they were there as an exhibition class. And so I went down and met them and talked to them after the races were over. And it was really cool. It was neat seeing those old Novas, and there's an old Chevelle out there, and old 57 Chevys, and the shoebox Chevys, and old Oldsmobiles, so just to see those old cars out on the track. I mean, it's like I say, if you ever get the opportunity to go to one, whether it be the Nostalgia Dirt Series, the Airs Series, the Eastern, or I think it's the Eastern Iowa Vintage Car Series or something like that, that's a new club that's kind of starting up. I've seen some stuff on. So if you can get to one, go to one. You won't be disappointed.
Okay, so Chad, do you have a racing nickname at the racetrack?
What's that?
Do you have a racing nickname at the racetrack?
No, I never really had a nickname at the track that I knew of. Now, when I was first getting started, I could have had a nickname that probably is not very PG-13 rated, but I never had a nickname. People that knew me though or know me call me Noodles yet, and that was from my high school days of football. My actually, yeah, my freshman year when I still played sports. We were at practice, and I had eaten supper before practice because we had practice twice a day. It was in August, and let's just say it wasn't a good idea to have beef stroganoff before football practice. So then
Oh yeah,
even
not
after
good, not good.
no, even after I quit playing football, I still to this day I'll see someone I haven't seen for quite a while, and they'll call me Noodles. It's my name to a lot of people will always be Noodles.
Okay, okay. So Chad, gonna do something pretty cool. I've been doing this ever since we kind of moved over to YouTube. I'm gonna turn the mic over to you. You can ask me some questions if you'd like.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'll ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
What was your draw to dirt track racing in specific? What
Oh,
motivates you with it?
what motivates me with it is just the sheer being out there smelling the alcohol racing fuel, just seeing the cars go around the track as fast as they can. And it's been my go-to sport as far as racing in general since I've been 6 years old. And I've been a racing fan for 30 plus years. And I was like, back in the day, who did you go for, just for instance on the NASCAR tour? And I says, back in the day when I was racing, before all this stage racing cred come down with NASCAR, I remember guys like Davey Allison, Alan Kowicki, Tim Richmond, Dale Earnhardt, Neil Bonnet, and all them guys racing on a Sunday afternoon. And dirt track wise, I love go watch Doug Peterson in an A mod and Mike Eisner, and I love watching all the dirt track racing there is, especially like I said, I've seen some nostalgia races up and around here. I'm at Fairmount Raceway, and it's pretty fun to watch them guys on the track too. Anything like I said, anything with four wheels and a motor on a dirt track, or NASCAR, or IndyCar, or drag racing wise, and tractor pulling wise, it's and sprint car wise, it's right up my alley.
Yeah, the pure power of stuff. It's just the man over machine thing, getting things figured out. That's pretty cool. So let's talk about food here for a little bit. What's your
Okay.
food? What's your go-to food at the track? What are you after when you get to the track?
I agree with you. I'm going to go the supernaturals on that one there. That's hands down, definitely. Yes, hands down.
Yep. The
Yeah.
only thing that's in a good second place to a regular super nacho is if they have pulled pork nachos at the track, which a couple more tracks are
Ooh.
getting pulled pork nachos now. And so if
Oh
that's
yeah.
there, and then depending on the day, first trip through is super nachos, second trip through is pulled pork nachos for me. So
Oh yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of racing, I mean, what's your passion or your hobby outside of?
everybody asks me that, and I says, me, I eat, sleep, and breathe racing. Always have been, always will. I love to go to watch some football games once in a while. I love 80s rock, 1980s rock. My go-to band is Def Leppard. Yes,
Awesome.
yes, yes. And the reason why Def Leppard's my go-to band is because, a lot of people nowadays, the younger kids don't understand that the way they have their drummer set up with one arm, nobody back before that happened with Rick Allen, nobody would have thought of having a drummer play the drums with one arm.
Exactly. They would thought, when the accident happened, it would have been game over, career over,
Yeah.
back
Oh
then.
yeah.
But they're very innovative and very think outside the box at the time, to make it so Rick Allen could continue to drum, which, he
Yeah.
needed a little help with some synthesizers and stuff like that, some foot triggered stuff, but he's still making the noise. It's his body making the noise. So I
Oh
thought it
yes.
was
Yes.
it was pretty awesome.
Oh yes. Definitely. And as far as my go-to restaurant, Chad, away from the racetrack, I love anything Chinese like you. Arby's, I love going to. I love their mozzarella sticks at Arby's. Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
Arby's
yeah.
is a hell of a treat for me around here. And I guess the
Oh,
you answered the music one, and I mean, who was if you had the opportunity to meet anybody in motorsports that you haven't met yet? I mean, who would you want to meet? Who would you? I mean, who's your
that's
hero?
my hero out of the IndyCar series. I'll tell you what, if I could meet him, that would be a trip. But he's gone upstairs to be with the man upstairs. I would have loved to have met Dan Weldon just to sit down and
Yeah,
talk to him and ask him what it was like to win the Indy 500, what it was like to do 240 miles an hour around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And yeah, definitely.
yeah. IndyCar drivers are a different breed to me because you got to. I mean, NASCAR too, but in my mind, IndyCar drivers are definitely wired a little bit different because you gotta have a good head on your shoulders to be going 250 miles an hour and then turn left. So
Yes.
I think that's pretty cool.
And another thing I would have loved to have asked him, hey, Dan, what was that feeling like when you come off of corner number four and, J.R. Hildebrand hit the wall and you're passing him to win the Indy 500, your second Indy 500? What was that feeling like for you? And that would have been my next question to him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many for myself too that I got the opportunity back in the day. I got to meet um a couple of NHRA drivers when I was in Arizona at the races down there. So, Jim Dunn was, I got to have a Pepsi with Jim Dunn and just talk to him for a minute. And I just happened to run into him of all places at a snack shack at the track down there. and at Firebird Raceway, and he was getting a Pepsi and I was getting a Pepsi, and so I got to talk to him for a little bit. So that was pretty cool. That's going to be one of the highlights of my life too, is getting to talk to him, because he was an innovator in the NHRA world years ago, back in the '60s. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool to get that opportunity.
Did you
Other,
ever hear the story? Did you ever hear the story, Chad, about how Tony Stewart met his wife Leah?
I don't believe so. No.
It was really kind of crazy because they did an interview with him on YouTube. Oh gosh, it's been a little while ago. And they asked him, they says, "So Tony, what okay, did you ever think about getting married when you were racing?" And he says, crazy enough, I was engaged, I was going with somebody, and Leah was engaged to somebody. And he says, how me and Leah got together is really quite the interesting story. And he says, Don Perdome is the one that kind of introduced us because Don kept saying, I went to an NHRA race and he kept saying, "Hey, you need to go talk to Leah. You need to go talk to this Leah girl." And he's like, "I'm in a relationship here." He says, "She's in a relationship. I don't want to do that when she's in a relationship. So he says, lo and behold, about fast forward a few months later, he says, I had gotten out of my relationship and Leah was getting out of hers and was actually out of hers too. And Don Prudhomme come up to me again. And he's like, "Man, you really need to go talk to this Leah girl." And he says, "Okay." So he went over and talked to her. And he says, we just started talking about racing and stuff like that. Well, lo and behold, he says, how we started dating is he says, I knew that she was racing down at Gainesville, Florida. And he says, I was already in my bus getting ready to go someplace. And he says, I talked to Leah. "Hey, Leah, where you racing at this weekend?" "Well, I'm in Gainesville, Florida. What are you doing?" And he's like, I had planned, but he says, "I'm in my camper. I'm willing to drive 6 to 8 hours to come watch you race." And she's like, "Really? You're going to do that?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he says, so when I got going down the road, well, then she called me again and she says, "Are you for sure doing this?" And he says, "Yeah, I am." He says, "In fact," he says, "I'm going to roll into Gainesville, Florida about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the day of race day. So I'm going to get a few hours of sleep, but not much." But he says, "I went to watch her race at Gainesville." And he says, got done with Gainesville. And that's right around the time COVID started. And he said, he says, I raced, I just got done racing someplace. And he says, got down to Gainesville and they did the race there. Well, that following Monday is when stuff started shutting down. And he says, stuff started shutting down. And he says, my thought was, okay, stuff's shutting down. I would love to take my RV and travel Route 66 and just travel it as far as it'll go. And he says, I was going to do that. Well, he says, crazy enough, Leah pops into the equation again. And she says, "Well, if you're traveling Route 66, can I join you?" And he's like, "Sure, I guess." So he says, we traveled Route 66. And at that time, she invited me out to Lake Havasu City out in Arizona where she was living at. And he says, I got out there. We got out there. And he says, I was only going to spend a couple days. Well, stuff shut down. And he says, I was stuck out there for 4 months. And he says, that's how we got into a relationship because he says, I had to live with her for 4 months.
And now look at him now. You know,
Yeah.
Tony Stewart, a drag racer. Never in my mind did I ever think those words would be in the same sentence together, but here we are.
And he said, the craziest thing is when we started dating and stuff like that and getting into a relationship together, I literally had to get on the phone with my sponsors because I was sponsored by Mobile One and Ford, and she's sponsored by Pennzoil and Dodge. And he says, "How is this going to work? Are you just going to bother you sponsors?" He says, "I'll promise you, if I going to meet with her, go to a race or something like that, I won't wear anything Mobile or Ford located on it." And she agreed when she would talk to Pennzoil that, hey, and Dodge, when I go to see Tony race, I won't wear anything that says Pennzoil or Dodge on it. So he says, and then they were fine with it. So yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty crazy. That's a pretty good
yeah,
story. I like that.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. And he says, going to watch a drag race and standing on the start finish line as they're taking off at 10,000 horsepower, 330 miles an hour. He says that's an adrenaline rush right there.
Yeah, that is quite a rush. Being around the nitromethane cars, had the opportunity to go to a couple NHRA national events, in Brainerd, Minnesota, and I flew down to to Phoenix here about 10, 12 years ago and went to the races down there, and that too is a whole nother breed of people because you don't know. You could never think you could hear sound, but the first time watched a nitromethane car take off during qualifying, just the ripples that come through the air that you could see, and I think it was actually my eyeballs vibrating in my head, but it looked
Oh
like you
yeah,
were seeing noise. It's loud and it's just raw horsepower. So
yeah,
that's my draw
yeah.
to the drag racing stuff too.
Yeah. So, Ted, do you have any more questions for me?
I think you kind of covered them. You kind of caught me off guard, but I like that. That's I just that's I don't think I got any other questions for you.
One of the other things I was going to add into when we were talking about, my favorite race car drivers I'm looking up to, when I was growing up and watching dirt racing too, World of Outlaw sprint car stuff, my driver I got to meet, and I'm glad I got to meet him after he retired, even after he retired and he's still around. I actually got to sit down and have a conversation with Doug Wolfgang. That was pretty
Oh,
neat.
cool. Yeah.
Sit down and talk to Wolfie. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of those old sprint car and late model drivers. I think it'd be fun to sit down with Bloomer for a little bit, so, talk to Scott Bloomquist. Steve Kinzer. He was always when I got into watching sprint car racing, watching Steve Kinzer out there. That was sprint cars are pretty cool too. I mean, there's just so many things I've wanted to try in my life. I've got the opportunity to dabble in a few, but some I'm just a better spectator because I'm pretty sure if I got into a sprint car, that wouldn't be a good outcome for myself.
Funny you should bring up Bloomquist. I have a really cool story to share with you about Bloomquist, and I share this once in a while. About 4 or 5 years ago, actually a few years into filming the racing show off of Facebook Live before we moved over to YouTube, I happened to be at an event a couple of years ago at Jackson Motorplex when the Lucas Oil late models were there. And I was walking through the pit area and a friend of mine was with me and I said, well, if you want to go talk to some race drivers, you can. I want to go try to have a conversation with Bloomquist because he was there that night. And just so happens he was signing autographs on his four wheeler because he had pulled up on his four wheeler after the races. And after the crowd decided to vacate and dwindle down, I got a hold of him and I says, Scott, I got a question for you. I says, even though the crowd's dwindled down and stuff like that, and you signed an autograph for me, I says, I host a racing show on Facebook. I told him what it was. I says, down the line, if I would have you on the racing show, how would I go about contacting you? And he was sitting right there. There was a few fans still sticking around, and he kind of did this thing with his finger, motioned me for me to come down to his ear. And he says, "You have a piece of paper?" And I says, "I got a business card. Hold on." So I opened up my wallet and had one of my racing show business cards. And he says, "Do you have a Sharpie or something?" I says, "Sure." So he kind of wrote it down, and he says, "Here's my phone number. Call me sometime." And I'm like, "Okay,
Oh
that's
wow,
pretty cool.
cool.
That's pretty cool to have that conversation with him."
Yeah, yeah, that is really neat. Good for you. That's cool.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, like I said, racing is my passion. I live it. I eat, sleep, and breathe it, and I live it daily. So yes.
That's awesome. The world needs more people, or motorsports in general needs people like you to keep promoting and keep driving, along with the people that build the cars. Whoa, I got a glitch going on. It looks like.
Hold on, it'll settle down. It just takes a little bit. It
Okay,
takes a little bit.
but
Oh, hold on,
it
hold on, hold on. Quit glitching out. Quit glitching out, please. Oh, hold on a second there. Quit glitching out. Hold on. Hold on there.
Hey, there I
Okay,
am.
Chad. Okay, there you are. Okay, so yeah, Chad, definitely. And I was going to tell you two, because I got you on there with me. Coming up this week, I have an opportunity coming up next week, I should say. KKOJ Radio in Jackson, Minnesota. They cover the Jackson Motorplex races, a lot of the area dirt track races around. they invited me up there to do a live interview with them on the radio station about my racing show that I do for you guys.
I seen that. I seen that. I follow you on Facebook, and I seen that. I was reading that the other day. That's really cool. Yesterday, I think I was reading that. So
Yeah,
that's good for you. Like I said, we to keep motorsports and dirt track racing alive, we got to get that younger generation, engaged in it. And the only way to keep them engaged is to keep, podcasts like this, anything that you can't just forget about it. You can't just think it's always going to be there, because it's not necessarily going to be the case. It could go away. So, the guys need to keep committing to building cars, and people like yourself need to keep committing to promoting it. And whether it be, like I said, in my mind, it's any motorsport. I'm not biased or selective on one particular. It's all of it. Because there's so much that goes into and is involved with racing, that it's just not a motor and a driver get in. There's so much science and physics and just so much that you have to think about. So for a lot of kids, it's good to get them involved in something they like, because they're actually learning. And I'm learning to this day. I'm going on 49 years old, and I learn more and more every day. So I
yeah.
think what you're doing is great.
So, Ted, do you have a racing page that the racing fans can follow you on?
No, I do not. You know, Over the course about the last 5 years, for the garden tractor pulling, I've been running a club and president of a club.
So,
So I've been
so what's the name of that club?
um, it's called Lil Wopsy Pullers. Um,
Okay.
and I don't know if it's one of our
Oh, yeah,
stickers
yeah,
with our logo on it.
yeah,
Um, and you can go. We have a Facebook page, a Facebook group. Any
yeah.
follower, they can get on there. The club as we know it is going to go through a phase here where it's going to change a little bit. I stepped down as president of the club to open myself up for the other racing stuff that I want to pursue. So the club is still, the Facebook page, the group is still in existence. It's just ownership is going to get transferred over to somebody, to an individual that's going to run it more as a business than as a club. So, I mean, if there's anybody that's interested in pulling, do a Facebook search for Lil Wopsy Pullers, LIL, Little Wopsy, WAPSI, and Pullers, and you'll find our Facebook page or Facebook group. I'm the admin of the page, and that page has got pictures, it's got results, it's got information, pictures and videos and all kinds of stuff of what our club has done for the last 5 going on 6 years since I took over as president. Just like I said, I've am I glitching out again?
A little bit. You're fine. Just continue talking. It'll stop
Oh,
eventually. It'll
okay,
stop
yeah.
eventually.
But anybody interested in it can do a search for it, and they'll find us. And that page will continue to be in existence. The name of it will probably change here after the first of the year, but all the information will always be there, and the name of the group will probably change. But that's what I've been devoting myself to. I've been the admin of that group for 5 years now, so that's why I haven't had a page of my own. But I believe I will have a page, this winter. I will have a page that's going to chronicle my dirt track racing and my garden tractor pulling stuff that I do, so people be able to go on that and see what I've been up to.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, go watch. Go look up Little Wopsy Pullers, LLWAPSI Pullers on Facebook. Follow them. Join that group. Also, ladies and gentlemen, Chad Cutsworth here is going to hopefully create a page for his racing career. But Chad, thank you very much for being on the racing show tonight, talking to us about your racing career. I'll have you step out, Chad, and I will call you in a little bit to thank you in person.
Sounds good, Josh. Appreciate it. You have a good night.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Chad Cutsworth, nostalgia race car driver and little tractor pull driver also. So, ladies and gentlemen, go hit up Chad Cutsworth on Facebook for definitely you can follow his racing career this year. And also, ladies and gentlemen, go press like and follow and become a member of that little Wapsie Pullers group. Also, ladies and gentlemen. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Chad Cutsforth and his racing team for being a part of this racing show with me tonight. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not, if you have not, go press like, subscribe, and hit that notification button on the Josh Nolan and Oliver Schultz Full Throttle Racing Show #1 on YouTube. Um, I would like to thank our sponsors, Dirt Track Race Cars and Company. Go hit up dirtrackracecars.com for all your racing diecast needs. They have the 164 scale of Doug Wolfgang. He drives the white 8D car in, um, that he drove it in 1989 for the Knoxville Nationals. They've got that in the 164th. Go buy that one up. Also, ladies and gentlemen, they have the Orange 8 car that Doug Wolfgang drove in 1990. That's in 164 scale also. Then also, ladies and gentlemen, go hit up the Doug Wolfgang Weikert Livestock number 29 164 scale car, also put out by Dirt Track Race Cars and Company, dirtrackracecars.com. Also, ladies and gentlemen, go purchase the 47 Danny the Dude Lasowski Gil Sonner Casey's General Store sprint car that he drove in 1994. And also, that's on 164th also. And then also, ladies and gentlemen, they have the one Nance Sammy Swindell sprint car that he drove in 1982. That's in 164 scale also. So go pick up all those dirt track race cars and many more at dirtrackracecars.com. It's Dirt Track Race Cars and Company at dirtrackracecars.com. So I would like to thank Dirt Track Race Cars and Company for sponsoring this racing show, along with Brody Manning and Manning Motorsports. And also, I'd like to thank New England Hemophilia Association and Walking with Waylon Page also. But if you would like to sponsor our racing show or be on our racing show, feel free to email us at jjnolan151@gmail.com, or you can call or text us at 712-209-7138. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. Catch you later on another episode of the Josh Nolan and Oliver Schultz Full Throttle Racing Show #1 on YouTube. And continue living life at full throttle.